What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved stars walks into what should be a friendly late-night interview, only to face disrespect so shocking that the entire set goes silent? In just 33 seconds, one comment from the host would turn a casual conversation into the most talked-about television moment of the year. Jamie Foxx arrived at the studio that evening, expecting the usual banter. He'd been on plenty of talk shows before. The routine was always the same: sit down, tell a few stories, laugh with the host, promote whatever project he was working on, and leave on good terms. Simple, easy, comfortable. But from the moment Jamie walked onto the set, something felt different. Andy Cohen sat behind his desk with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. The audience clapped as Jamie made his entrance, flashing that signature smile everyone loved. He waved, took his seat across from Andy, and settled in. "Jamie Foxx, everybody," Andy said, his tone already carrying an edge that seemed out of place. The audience applauded again, but Andy barely acknowledged them. His focus was locked on his guest. "Great to be here," Jamie said, keeping things light and friendly. Andy leaned back in his chair, looking Jamie up and down in a way that felt more like sizing someone up than welcoming them. "So, Jamie, big movie star, Oscar winner, musician, comedian, you do it all, don't you?" Jamie laughed, a little uncertain. "I try to stay busy, yeah." "Stay busy," Andy repeated, his voice dripping with something that wasn't quite admiration. "Must be nice, having all those options, all those doors open for you." The words hung in the air for a moment. Jamie's smile faltered just slightly. "I mean, I've worked hard for everything I've got. You know how it is." Andy didn't respond to that. Instead, he shuffled some papers on his desk, not even looking at Jamie anymore. "So, let's talk about your new movie. Another action film. How many of those have you done now? 10? 15? "I think this is my 5th or 6th action movie," Jamie said, trying to steer things back to normal. "But this one's different because 5th or 6th? Andy cut him off, his voice sharp. "And they all kind of blend together, don't they? I mean, how do you even keep track? Big explosions, car chases, you playing the hero, same formula every time." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful ribbing that usually happened on talk shows. This was something else, something meaner. Jamie's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "Well, I wouldn't say they all blend together. Each character has their own." "Their own what?" Andy interrupted again, leaning forward now. "Their own backstory that nobody cares about? Come on, Jamie. We both know these movies aren't exactly Citizen Kane. You're just there to look good and cash the check, right?" A few people in the audience gasped. Jamie sat up straighter in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. "That's not fair, man. I put a lot of work into these roles. I care about the stories I'm telling." Andy waved a dismissive hand. "Sure you do. Just like you cared about that album you put out. What was that, 5 years ago? How'd that do for you?" Jamie's eyes narrowed. "My album did fine. My fans supported it." "Your fans?" Andy said with a laugh that had no warmth in it. "Right, all 12 of them." The audience went completely silent now. Even the crew members behind the cameras looked uncomfortable. This had crossed a line, and everyone in the room knew it. Jamie took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep himself in check. "Andy, I don't know what's going on here, but this feels personal. Did I do something to offend you?" Andy shrugged, that smirk still plastered on his face. "Offend me? No, Jamie, I'm just asking questions. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? I'm a talk show host. This is my show, my set, my rules." "Your rules," Jamie repeated slowly, his voice getting quieter but somehow more intense. "So your rules include disrespecting your guests? Making them feel unwelcome? Is that how you treat everybody who comes on here?" "Only the ones who take themselves too seriously," Andy shot back. "You're an entertainer, Jamie. Act like one. Entertain me. Give me something interesting instead of sitting there looking offended because I'm not kissing your feet like everyone else does." Jamie stood up from his chair. The movement was sudden enough that it startled Andy, whose smirk finally disappeared. "I'm not asking you to kiss my feet. I'm asking you to show some basic respect. That's it. That's all any guest deserves when they take time out of their day to be on your show." Andy stood up too, his face reddening. "Respect? You want to talk about respect? You show up here 20 minutes late, you barely say 2 words to anyone on my staff, and now you're lecturing me about respect?" "I was late because traffic was a nightmare," Jamie said, his voice rising now. and I said hello to everyone I saw backstage. Don't make things up to justify how you're acting right now. I'm not making anything up, Andy said, his voice getting louder to match Jamie's. You walked in here like you owned the place, like this was some kind of chore you had to get through. Well, newsflash, Jamie, not everyone is impressed by you. Not everyone thinks you're as great as you think you are. The audience was dead silent. A few people had their phones out, recording every second of this meltdown. The cameras were still rolling, capturing everything. Jamie shook his head slowly. You know what? I don't need this. I came here to have a conversation, to talk about my work, to connect with people who might enjoy what I do. But if you're going to sit here and attack me for no reason, I'm done. Oh, you're done? Andy said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Just like that? You're just going to walk out? Yeah, Jamie said firmly. I am. Because I don't have to sit here and take this from you or anyone else. Life's too short to waste time with people who get their kicks from tearing others down. Andy pointed a finger at Jamie, his face now fully red with anger. You walk out that door, and you'll regret it. Do you know how many people would kill to be on my show? How many careers I've helped launch? How much influence I have in this industry? Jamie stopped and turned back to face Andy. Is that what this is about? Your influence? Your power? You think that gives you the right to treat people however you want? I think it means I don't have to coddle overpaid actors who can't handle a few tough questions. Andy snapped back. Tough questions? Jamie said, his voice incredulous. You didn't ask me tough questions. You insulted me. You insulted my work. You insulted my music. You've been trying to get under my skin from the moment I sat down, and now you want to act like you're some kind of hard-hitting journalist? Give me a break. Andy stepped out from behind his desk, moving closer to Jamie. Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, you could handle a real conversation instead of the softball interviews you're used to. There's a difference between being sensitive and not tolerating disrespect, Jamie said, standing his ground. And right now, you're way over the line. Get off my stage, Andy said suddenly, his voice cold and sharp. If you can't handle being here, then leave. Nobody's forcing you to stay. Jamie looked at him for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was calm but filled with disappointment. You're right. Nobody's forcing me to stay, and I'm not going to. But before I go, I want everyone here to know something. This isn't about me being sensitive or not being able to handle criticism. This is about how you choose to treat people. And from where I'm standing, you've shown everyone exactly who you are tonight. And who's that? Andy challenged, crossing his arms. Someone who thinks being cruel makes them interesting, Jamie said quietly. Someone who confuses being mean with being honest. Someone who's so insecure about their own place in this industry that they have to tear down people who are doing well. Andy's face went pale. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Jamie said. I know that a real host, a real interviewer, lifts people up. They ask challenging questions, sure. They push their guests to open up and share things they might not normally share, but they do it with respect. They do it with the understanding that the person sitting across from them is a human being, not a target for their own issues. The audience started to applaud. It began with just a few people, then more joined in, until most of the room was clapping for Jamie. Andy looked around, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. Stop, Andy said, holding up his hand to the audience. Stop clapping. This is my show. You don't applaud until I tell you to. But the audience didn't stop. If anything, the applause grew louder. Jamie nodded to them, acknowledging their support, then turned back to Andy one last time. You can have your show, Jamie said. You can have your set and your desk and your rules, but what you can't have is my dignity. That's mine. And I'm walking out of here with it intact. Andy's hands balled into fists at his sides. Fine, leave, but don't expect to ever come back here. Don't expect anyone in this building to ever take your calls again. I won't, Jamie said simply, because I won't be calling. He turned and started walking toward the exit. Andy called out after him, his voice cracking with desperation now. You think you're better than me? You think you're some kind of saint? Jamie stopped but didn't turn around. I don't think I'm better than you, Andy. I just think I deserve better than this. And so does everyone else who comes on your show. You're making a huge mistake, Andy said, but his voice had lost its edge. Now he just sounded defeated. No, Jamie said, finally turning to face him one last time. The mistake was thinking you'd treat me with the same respect I was ready to give you. That's on me. But I'm correcting it right now. The audience erupted into applause again, even louder than before. Several people stood up, giving Jamie a standing ovation as he walked toward the exit. The crew members, the producers, everyone backstage seemed frozen, unsure of what to do or how to react. Andy stood alone on his stage, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "Cut the cameras," he shouted. "I said cut the cameras!" But the cameras kept rolling. The moment was too big, too raw, too real to stop now. Jamie reached the exit door, pushed it open, and walked through without looking back. As the door closed behind him, Andy turned to his audience, his crew, everyone watching. "Well," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "I guess that's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for coming." Nobody moved. Nobody clapped. The audience just sat there, staring at Andy with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. Some people started getting up and walking out, not even waiting for the official end of the show. Andy looked down at his desk, shuffling papers that didn't need to be shuffled, avoiding eye contact with everyone around him. One of the producers approached him, whispered something in his ear. Andy nodded but didn't respond. The stage lights started to dim. The show was over, but not in any way Andy had planned. This wasn't the carefully orchestrated television moment he was used to controlling. This was chaos. This was real. This was the consequence of pushing someone too far. Backstage, Jamie walked through the corridor toward the exit. Staff members stepped aside to let him pass, some offering apologetic looks, others giving him thumbs up and nods of approval. One young production assistant stopped him. "Mr. Foxx," she said quietly, "I just wanted to say thank you for standing up for yourself. A lot of guests have had issues with him, but nobody's ever called him out like that." Jamie gave her a tired smile. "Sometimes you have to draw a line. I'm just sorry it had to happen like this." "Don't be sorry," she said. "He needed to hear it." Jamie continued toward the exit, his security team meeting him at the door. They escorted him to his car, and as he climbed into the back seat, he let out a long breath. His phone was already buzzing with texts and calls, but he ignored them all for the moment. Inside the studio, Andy sat in his dressing room, alone. His producer knocked on the door, then entered without waiting for permission. "That was a disaster," the producer said bluntly. Andy didn't look up. "I know. The network's already calling. They want to know what happened. They want to know if we can salvage this. Can we?" Andy asked. Though his tone suggested he already knew the answer, the producer hesitated. "I don't know. Social media is already blowing up. The footage is everywhere. People are not reacting well to how you treated him." Andy finally looked up, his eyes tired. "I was just trying to keep things interesting, keep the energy up. Ask questions nobody else would ask." "There's a difference between asking tough questions and attacking your guest," the producer said carefully. "You crossed that line tonight." Multiple times, Andy stood up, pacing the small room. He was being difficult. He wasn't giving me anything to work with. "Andy," the producer said, his voice firm now, "he wasn't being difficult. You were being hostile. From the moment he sat down, you were antagonizing him. Everyone saw it. Everyone in that studio, everyone watching at home, everyone's going to see it now that it's online. So what am I supposed to do?" Andy asked, his voice rising. "Apologize? Grovel? Pretend I did something wrong when I was just doing my job?" "You weren't doing your job," the producer said quietly. "Your job is to make your guests feel comfortable enough to open up and share interesting stories. Your job is to entertain your audience, not make them uncomfortable. Tonight, you failed at both." Andy sat back down heavily. "This is going to ruin me, isn't it?" The producer didn't answer right away. "I don't know. Maybe. But what I do know is that if you don't take responsibility for what happened tonight, if you try to spin this or blame Jamie, it's definitely going to ruin you. People aren't stupid. They saw what happened. They know who was in the wrong." Back in his car, Jamie's phone continued to buzz. He finally picked it up and saw messages from friends, family, colleagues, all expressing support for how he'd handled the situation. A few were from other celebrities who'd apparently had similar experiences with Andy but had stayed quiet about it. One message stood out. It was from a young actor Jamie had mentored years ago. It simply said, "You showed me how to stand up for myself tonight. Thank you." Jamie smiled and put his phone away. Despite how uncomfortable the whole situation had been, he knew he'd done the right thing. Nobody should have to endure disrespect, no matter how big the platform or how powerful the person wielding it. The car pulled away from the studio, taking Jamie back to his life, his work, his family, all the things that mattered more than any television appearance ever could. Behind him, the studio stood quiet now, empty except for the skeleton crew cleaning up and the producer trying to figure out how to handle the fallout. In the dressing room, Andy sat alone, staring at his reflection in the mirror. For the first time in a long time, he didn't like what he saw looking back at him. The confident, powerful host was gone. In his place was someone who'd let their ego and their need for control destroy what should have been a simple, pleasant interview. The truth settled over him slowly, painfully. He'd lost more than just a guest tonight. He'd lost credibility. He'd lost the trust of his audience. And worst of all, he'd lost respect for himself. Because deep down, beneath all the defensiveness and anger, he knew the producer was right. He knew Jamie was right. He'd been wrong, and now everyone knew it. The question now was what he would do about it. Would he learn from this? Would he change? Or would he double down, blame others, and continue on the same path that had led him to this moment? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, this night would be remembered. This conversation would be replayed over and over, and the image of Jamie Foxx walking off that stage with his dignity intact would become a symbol of something bigger than just one bad interview. It would become a reminder that respect isn't negotiable, that power doesn't give anyone the right to diminish others, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away from a situation that doesn't serve you, no matter how big the spotlight or how loud the voices telling you to stay. Jamie understood that. He'd lived it. And in that moment, when he'd stood up from that chair and decided he'd had enough, he'd shown everyone watching what it really means to value yourself. Not in an arrogant way, not in a selfish way, but in the simple, powerful way of someone who knows their worth and refuses to let anyone diminish it. That was the real story of what happened that night, not the drama, not the confrontation, not the viral moment that would be shared and discussed for days to come. The real story was about one person's decision to prioritize their dignity over their discomfort, to choose respect over ratings, to walk away from something that looked good on paper but felt wrong in practice. And as Jamie's car disappeared into the night, heading toward home and the people who truly mattered to him, he carried with him the peace that comes from knowing he'd stayed true to himself, even when it was hard, even when it was awkward, even when walking away seemed like the more difficult choice than staying and enduring. He'd chosen himself, and in doing so, he'd given permission to everyone watching to do the same.